So I'm joined today by Mike Urquhart of MVP Performance. Before we get into how we know each other, if you just want to give the listeners an intro to your background, and we'll kickstart with why do you do what you do?
So firstly, it has to come through enjoyment. I really enjoy the variety that comes with S&C, particularly working with different age groups at the moment. So the variety that comes with that, and just mainly the fact that it's not a desk job is where I've always led from. So always follow what you enjoy through university, and then coming up from there. Just the pleasure of seeing someone get better. Specifically, so a lot of S&C coaches probably always wanted to be an athlete, haven't quite got there. So next best thing is to make someone else achieve their dream instead of you.
Absolutely. So describe to the listeners what you're doing at the moment, because we obviously know each other from our masters, but we've gone in slightly different directions. So if you just give almost a Reader's Digest of how you've got to what you're doing at the moment.
So how I got to would be sports science at Bangor University, undergrad, and then that's led me almost got to the point where I tossed the coin on whether to follow the nutrition route or S&C route. Ended up choosing S&C for various different reasons, which is where obviously we met each other at Middlesex back in 2015. Within that time, did an internship with London Broncos, and then following on from that, went back home to my parents, did some private coaching, and then met you again at the boarding school that we worked at. Did 2 years there, coaching a bit of hockey and obviously a bit of S&C, and then now I'm working for a company called Project MVP, where we're traveling the country doing fitness testing at different schools and sports clubs and unis. We're looking at giving people an insight into where their baseline is, where their strengths and where their areas of improvement might lie, and we're trying to support them in their athletic journey towards any success that they might look for. So we might lead them towards the sport that they currently enjoy and help them focus their attention towards that. If they have no idea, then we might give them some ideas on what's around them, how we might be able to help. So it's kind of a little bit of talent idea, a little bit of pathway work, and then a lot of fitness testing.
Excellent. We'll dive into the MVP stuff later in the podcast, but just because obviously we've both had our own respective experiences with internships, and I know internships get a bit of a bad rap from certain corners of the S&C world. So my first question is, how necessary do you think S&C internships are? And if they could be improved upon in any way, how would you improve them, bearing in mind the experiences that you've gone through?
Wouldn't necessarily, well, I was going to say, I don't necessarily just necessity, but that if you could get the paid, I don't think you need an internship if you can get paid work and go and get paid work. I don't think you would stop yourself from applying because you haven't done an internship, and others have. But certainly that's the current route that everyone seems to have to take. It's that you can't get a job because you haven't got experience. The only way of getting the experience that someone else hasn't got is to find yourself and battle yourself into an internship. So I think the experiences that I got personally almost molded who I am as a coach. And I was able to take that experience and that confidence that came from the coaching exposure that I got has really helped me. So I think a lot of internships vary. I think if you were an internship at a super high up level straight off the bat, this is not speaking from experience here, so I struggle to know what they give you for you to then have the trial and error. But it isn't just putting out cones and counting shirts and a lot of the dog's body jobs. Whereas I think if you manage to bag an internship at a lower level where there's less staff and you're actually more needed and there's less on the line, so then they're more willing to give you that opportunity to do something, give you the feedback, give you the exposure to improve. Yeah, I think that's where the value would come. But you can't particularly pick and choose your internships when they're hard to come by and hard to get onto, even if you find a few. So yeah, I think grab what you can get and then reflect on the experiences you've got and then build upon that, I think.
So this might sound like a bit of an deliberately awkward question, but let's say I'm fresh out of uni and I've got a choice. I can earn money as a PT down a local gym, or I can get an unpaid internship with, let's say, a League One or League Two equivalent rugby club, or I can get an internship, or happen to be good enough to be offered an internship at, say, a top level organisation. So I don't know, the FA, English Institute of Sport. So 3 options: either paid work as a PT, internship with a lower level club or organisation, or an internship with a top organisation. I can only pick one of those 3. What would you go for, given the experiences that you've had?
So given the experiences I had, I would probably choose the middle option. PT work comes down. Part of the issue I've had with the latter half of my career so far, which is I've jumped straight into the work at the boarding school, where we're paving our way through a new project and we're having to design that ourselves and reflect upon it. And you've not had that person higher up the hierarchy to challenge you of those ideas. So going straight into PT work, you're going to have to go with what you think's best, and then the clients know even less than you. So then you don't have to have the whereabouts to reflect on that yourself, potentially without any feedback. Then you've got obviously the level that I had a positive experience at, which was obviously the middle order. And I think if you were to ask me that question before I'd done the internship, I would always choose option 3, which was the highest opportunity EIS situation, just through the idea of that, getting the experience and getting the feedback off of the most knowledgeable people in our field. So obviously you can seek that knowledge, and whether you can get in there and ask the right questions, and you're happy to gain the knowledge through conversations rather than gain that experience through coaching, and then take your understanding and then apply that trade elsewhere, potentially would be beneficial. But for me, physically doing it, physically making those mistakes, speaking to the coach, being given that opportunity to try another warm up a different way, or make sure you invested in that cue, why didn't that cue work, etc., then that's going to help you when you go, if you end up back down at the school level, where every cue makes a massive difference, and everyone takes that cue, and they might come back to you 3 weeks later and go, well, you said that a while ago, and the kids don't forget. And you're like, oh God, I've slipped my tongue almost there, and you've now done something wrong or different for 3 weeks. Whereas when you're coaching players more experienced, they might question you straight away, or they go, well, I don't agree with that, I'm not going to bother. So yeah, I think having that experience is the most important part, and practicing.
Do you think there's a bit of a, full disclaimer, obviously I have done an internship at the English Institute of Sport, but do you think there's almost a little bit of a snobbery, either when it comes to applying for jobs or people looking at jobs, which obviously I know that you're now in a position where you're looking at candidate CVs, but do you think there's a little bit of snobbery from some people within S&C, in the sense that, for example, somebody who comes from, say, 10 years of personal training experience, where they've trained their own clients for, almost a decade, that would almost get looked down upon, versus someone who's done 6 months of potentially just setting up cones, but they happen to have been setting up cones at a higher organisation, if that makes any sense. Now, obviously, there's a lot of context missing from that, but do you think experiences such as personal training are often overlooked?
Tough question, now, isn't it?
Yeah, again, think about it.
From my experience, brief experience of looking at employers and employees, I've not looked above them, and I've always spoken to them and at least given them a telephone interview, because a lot of the situations come with you get an issue with only employing people that are similar to you, so that no one's going to bring a variety of ideas that you might not have thought about before. So you're always going to employ people below you that are yourself, then you're never going to be challenged yourself and have that positive 360-degree management, as some people would call it. I think it does occur, and I think people potentially in those higher up places aren't willing to take the risk, per se, and have that person come into a football club who's never worked in football before, unless they've got a proven track record in rugby potentially. Whereas just having that person who is super keen to learn and has had that experience working with clients for 10 years, they're gonna have more practical experience, and they're gonna have worked out multiple different ways of using different equipment and working around the issues you've got with. If you're PTing in a gym at peak hours, you've got to work out your client can't squat because the squat rack's taken. You can't shoulder barge your weight and take them up. You're gonna have to go and think of something else. And the ability to think on your feet in difficult situations is always going to stand you well in a job versus not having to think based off that internship potentially, but just being ready to put a cone out and being ready to start a timer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've personally looked down to that level, and I don't look down upon them because they've still sat an exam, they've still proven competency. Whether it's less rigorous, yes, and it obviously depends what course they do, which I would then look into a little bit more, because as we know, you can do a very brief PT course and come from any background. But I think if you were looking at someone, yes, as you said, with 10 years experience, then you definitely got to give them a shot.
Yeah. And I like what you've sort of touched upon there, because sometimes I find it ironic that S&C coaches will try and say to parents or to coaches who might say stuff like, oh, have you ever worked with this sport before? And then you'll try and explain that sports are more similar than different. Yet when you see these job adverts, for example, for, I don't know, working in football, working in rugby, etc., and it'll say, what experience have you got in football or rugby? Even though, ironically, as S&C coaches, we try and describe the sports as more similar. So if you were in a position to recreate an internship experience for somebody, so you've mentioned that, for example, you might have the situation where, yes, you're doing an internship at an elite level, but you're not actually having that much responsibility, versus, for example, you're in an employment, whether you're a PT or similar to what we had at the private school, where you have no one to sort of refer to and sort of say, oh, what do you think of this? How would you design what you would define as, I don't know, the best internship experience that you could give a newly qualified practitioner or somebody who perhaps hasn't had that coaching experience?
I think I would definitely start with introducing structure. So they have a few set roles to begin with that, for example, in my set role at the start of Broncos, I was on skin folds, weighing boys in, doing the protein shakes and the ice baths. So I had to make sure that was done at X, Y, Z timings, and that gave me the structure, and it gave me an understanding to the rigidity of a professional athlete's day. So I certainly follow that route and start the same way to give them an understanding, and then gradually drip feed in that freedom to just go and try that, see how you feel with the warm-up, and give them enough notice, I think, the first time. So the first time I got given a warm-up, I got given 5 minutes notice, and obviously straight away a little bit of stage fright, and basically just copied what I remembered the previous guy had done. And it wasn't my own warm-up, it was just what I remembered the day before's warm-up was, and obviously players straight away. So I think I'd like to notice in the first one they have the confidence to deliver.
Yeah.
And then certainly have those set feedback times where they can feedback to you, because I don't think, even now, I'm never above feedback from anyone, and I've always prided feedback. And I think them looking in from the outside as a new intern, they can definitely provide feedback to you on how your operation might be able to change, but then they might not see it in a different way. So they're opening them up to give you that feedback for you then to say, well, we don't do it because of this. It's going to teach them the reason why it's not done that way. But if you never give them the opportunity to say anything, then they're never going to bring that up to understand it more.
No, I think that point's spot on. I think that, to me, hits at the heart of why it's too easy to see some people doing stuff on social media and think, oh, well, this is rubbish. But actually, by doing that, you've just seen what they do. What you haven't seen is why they haven't done something. Or, for example, and I've certainly been guilty of this, where you think, well, Jesus, they should be doing this, this, and this, but you don't realise that it doesn't work or they've tried it for whatever reason. One of the things I've got down in my notes, which I wanted to talk a bit more about, is your time at Broncos and the culture at the club. So one of the things I've got jotted down is passive negativity. So can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that?
Yeah. So, in a single sentence, passive negativity is one person coming into the changing room or the office or anywhere within the vicinity of the club and expressing negativity, whether it's you've got a blocked nose, it's rained on the way in when you cycled in, it's looking a little bit colder than the forecast was, or you've got an achy knee from yesterday or whatever. So as soon as you raise that, someone next to you who was feeling great then goes, oh yeah, I do have a bad hip actually. And suddenly everyone turns up to training and goes out in the field 10% less than where they were at when they sat down to put their socks on. So it's just encouraging the elimination of that. And once again, they have set periods of time where you can go and speak to the coach one-on-one and raise those issues, but it's not to just make those issues vocal to 35 players or even amongst the staff. It was forbidden for us within the time of training to come in and be like, oh, not sure I'm feeling tonight. Like, there's one guy I missed and I've now got 15 instead of 10. Crack on, get on with it. You've got 15 instead of 10. Get over the hurdle. It wasn't for then someone else to go, oh, we got 15 instead of 10. Oh, how am I going to work that out? Like, it's obviously in the planning, and it's in the fact that you've got to bring everyone else's spirits up, so you all go out there and you present yourself in a positive manner, so people who are feeling down and haven't mentioned anything get that lift, or they come to you from the side and they speak to you quietly about it if they are feeling in a certain way. It was just, the whole don't mention it in a public space at the risk of others coming down.
Yeah, and I think that's almost the point that some people miss when you talk about creating that team environment, and it's almost like, oh, well, we just turn into cheerleaders and don't worry if there is a problem with your hip, because if you think good about it, you'll be fine. Obviously, you are acknowledging those problems, you're just not doing it in front of everybody and letting that culture then spread. So obviously, whilst you were doing your internship, you were also doing the masters that we've mentioned. How important or how not important do you think a master's is in this day and age of trying to get either paid work, whether it's with an organisation or through setting up your own company? How important was that master's process for you, and is there anything you would have changed about it if you could?
I would say that the masters was one of the key moments of my life. I think I couldn't praise that course highly enough with Bish and Turner, what they've done to design that course. I thought was superb. But as I said, there's undergrad in North Wales. There's obviously Bangor City Football Club, and there's Carnarvon Town Rugby Club, bit of RGC for those that know their rugby as well. That was probably the limit of the experience you could get within S&C and sports performance in that area, and that obviously then required a car to drive up to 30 miles to get to the club on a weeknight and things like that. So that being said, didn't get any experience other than being captain of the hockey team, and as part of that having to learn to coach on a Monday night with obviously your peers and things like that. So going to London, my idea was if I go to London, there's enough density of clubs around there, I will get experience. Obviously ended up at Broncos as part of that experience, but I feel like I grew as a person as much as I did in the 3 years of uni in the 1 year of that master's course. And I learned more about critical thinking, how to critique papers, understand science, choose the good stuff, negate the bad stuff. Don't just be like, oh, that was a waste of time if I've read a paper that doesn't affect my practice, because it's the fact that it hasn't affected your practice means that you're not going to go down a rabbit hole of just trying to chase that, what it says. So learning to take a step back and really understand everything. And yeah, I think the corrective exercise module didn't have any knowledge of that prior to going in. And that's obviously one of the most integral parts of taking a look at someone initially. And the knowledge I've gained from that was really, really helpful. So I personally think that the masters, wherever you do it, if you're a distance learner from St Mary's or some of the other courses around the country, I think just getting that exposure and having that next level of thinking and understanding the science is really, really important.
Yeah, and like I said, I echo your comments. Like, I know that some people, for example, went on a CPD at the weekend and they said, well, you spend so much finance on, for example, furthering your understanding of the science, what would happen if you did it in the business sense? But I completely agree. We both obviously managed to publish our master's papers, which we'll get onto in a little while. But one, again, potentially awkward question that I've not written down that I want to ask you is, so when I was at the EIS, one of the reasons why they said that they wanted someone with a degree and or master's wasn't because they cared about the intricacies of their sports science knowledge, but was because they just felt like a degree, regardless of what background, gave people a bit of a bullshit filter. So me and you obviously send each other stuff on social media about whatever this person or that person's doing. So my question is, what advice would you give people in terms of having a bullshit filter who perhaps have an interest in sport or exercise, but, for example, don't have master's degree, whatever?
I think from a most basic level, I guess we come across people on social media all the time, and it comes from finding someone that you trust. And obviously, how do you gain that trust? You just have to follow them initially, and then start looking at the comments. If you've not got any background, I think social media is a really, really good place if you know what you're looking for. And to know what you're looking for, I think you need to find someone who then the comments aren't basically slating them, or if they are slating them, look at the person who's slating it and see if they have a reputable following or put out material that seems legit. Then if they're posting research alongside what they're saying, then obviously take a look at that research, see if you agree with it. Spend the time going through the methods and things like that. It's going to be a degree and a master's has taken us 4/5 years. So if you haven't done that time, then you should be able to invest the time in looking through the papers at a very detailed level and questioning people. And you might question someone and get sat down, but that's a learning opportunity in itself. But I think for us, like, throw a couple of names out there, obviously Quinn Hennick and Mike Israel and a few other people on the nutrition side of the world, like Martin McDonald and things. They've got very popular on social media, and people that we've learned to trust what they say, and they might call out other people that you also respect, but then you've got that middle ground. You haven't taken yourself sort of down the PhD route where you then so strongly believe in one thing that any opposition is, and we're sat in the middle going, oh, I can see that point, I can see that point. So I think you've got to start just by looking, gaining an interest in just seeing what's out there, and then read into the science, and then try and go, okay, well, Joe Wicks, what's his background? And then if he hasn't got a degree, or maybe he has, I've not obviously delved into his life too hard, but you might go, okay, well, he's not gained his experience from somewhere else, but there's a reputable place, whereas someone else has got a PhD, so okay, well, they've learned to filter the bullshit and then they're filtering it out for me, I'll read on. So I think, yeah, it's just a lot of it is trial and error on social media, and people would certainly believe in stuff. The low carb, high fat following is like almost tribal. If you disagree with it, then someone's followers are going to come and attack you until you shut up. But I think the S&C world's a little bit more placid at times.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think for me, that's the difficulty is, and this is something obviously we've discussed off air, but for example, both of us spent the best part of, I think actually you might have wrapped yours up a little bit quicker than I did, but took me 2 years to go from master's dissertation being handed in to it then being published. Whereas, as you said, the potentially dangerous thing about social media is if I have an opinion and a massive following, then I can put that up instantaneously. Like for example, I know I sent you a picture of a sponsored athlete the other day saying about the caffeinated drink and it kicking in just as she'd finished her stretches. And obviously people see that, and because it's a supposed reputable source, they jump on that obviously more because it's visually more appealing than, say, sitting down and critiquing the method of a study. Anyway, what I'm trying to say with that waffle is that basically be careful of where something comes from, and can you determine whether or not it's a quote unquote fact or an opinion. which especially nutrition studies is even harder to do. So you said you were torn between nutrition S&C, which are obviously fairly easy, or you can see how easily those fields would interact with each other. Something you always banter me for is having minimal interests outside of strength and conditioning. So my question to you is, when was the last time that you learned something from outside the realms of S&C that has influenced what you do inside the gym?
Inside the gym or inside S&C practice?
Inside S&C practice. We won't go so niche as to say the gym.
When will I think it's got to come down to working in business now, and my two, well, one of my bosses is an ex-professional rugby player, and the other one has only ever worked in business and recruitment. And he's obviously part of the business without the sports knowledge, but is there to drive the business forward. So I've gained a lot off him in terms of human communication and how to deal with people, how to deal with requests and things like that. So something might not be going to plan, but making sure that you can deliver the right information at the right time to people who may or may not be getting upset. I think that, and then you can take that into S&C really, really well with maybe a player's got injured, and you don't just come in and go, right, mate, you've snapped your knee, we'll see you next 9 months, you're going to be with a physio. Like, there's a way of delivering that information and having those people skills and going in and speaking about, as we said, like the positives, ignoring that passive negativity. Like, as soon as you tell them something, you go, okay, well, you're going to be on this. This is the situation with some of it, but we're going to be straight into on this, and this, and they can go into change rooms and be like, yeah, I'll be back in the gym next week, or I'll be in with you. Like, team spirit's going to be up. I'll be there, but won't be joining in with the same sets and reps as you. So, like, I'll be on the side doing my own thing, but I'll be there and like delivering that and just being like, yeah, that people side. You obviously learn a lot in S&C, but then in business, it's the next level. Like, people make or break life-changing deals and based off their engagement with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, one of the question I always open my podcast with is why do you do what you do? Just because in the book Start With Why, Simon Sinek says that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that just, as you said, comes down to that personal relationship. So how do you balance, for example, let's say I'm your athlete and I don't know, I snapped my Achilles or I blow my ACL. How do you balance, for example, this is everything that you know, but at the moment, this is how much the athlete needs to know. So how do you keep them informed whilst equally not taking a sledgehammer to their sort of hopes and dreams and aspirations, if that makes any sort of sense, whilst still being truthful with them?
I think initially it needs to come down to sort of managing expectations and be like, you're not going to play for a couple of months looking at how it looks right now. But you don't need to tell them like the details of it's like your Achilles is snapped off the bone and you're going to need surgery that's going to be booked in 3 weeks' time. Like, that information can come, or you answer those questions if they're asked. But I think straight up, it's got to be, here's the downsides, this is what's happened, but we'll get you in as soon as we can on the upper bodies. We're going to make sure you stay fit. We'll do some conditioning. We'll make sure you're in with this. And you've just got to keep them managed. And then when they start to ask those questions about, okay, so when's the first on feet day? If you go back to that Andy Murray documentary, if anyone's seen that online, the way he's dealt with his injury is unbelievable. And the fact that he's had so many setbacks, but the S&C coach has just come and gone, yeah, let's try and see how we can get on with this. And there's one of them that the S&C coach goes, well, he felt great, so we let him go. Like, when they feel good, you've got to let them go. And he went and played a tournament, got a couple of wins under his belt, and then it came back and the niggle started. So they went back to not square one, but he was absolutely buzzing for the next couple of months because they'd let him go and do that. And I think you've got to listen to your athlete, and if they're feeling good, then push it on. But don't just take the reins off. But
yeah,
I think you've got to tease in all positivity all the time, and especially with kids. We've obviously experienced some pretty major injuries related to either horse riding, falls, or ski accidents and things like that. So people come back in, and the peer pressure of school life, where you can't do PE lessons where you've got 9 a week potentially for some schools, or with your extracurricular and things like that. Yeah, you've got to manage expectations. Go, okay, well, we can't be doing this, but we're going to find something else that you enjoy. And someone might go and really begin to enjoy just like the mental toughness required to complete battle rope circuits and things like that, and give them that target to build on, and they'll soon be going from, oh well, battle ropes was easy, then going into like the heat chamber. If we go, I think in the Man City documentary, if we're going to pull another one, is Benjamin Mendy, where he's out injured and they've got him in a 33-degree heat chamber doing ropes, cycle sprints, this and that, whatever, and he's like, well, 80th minute of a game's going to be easy compared to this, and he's already reflecting on how this is benefiting him, not the fact that he's not out on the grass. I think that's integral to the psychology of injury, I think.
Yeah, and as you said, connecting it ultimately to the end goal, because it's so easy to just consider the physical limitations. But as you said, if it's a professional athlete you're dealing with, or even, I don't know, a school athlete who, for example, as you said, is used to playing sport 9-10 times a week, that's a huge part of their identity that gets lost whenever they get injured. So like, I think that's absolutely spot on. And diving back into the business side of things, so obviously you work for a company, Measure, Validate and Perform, and you obviously gave a little bit of information in regards to the talent ID setup. Do you want to give, perhaps delve into that a little bit more, and for example, what a day-to-day, week-to-week might look for you at MVP?
Yeah, so the company has been around for about 18 months now. We've tested just over 6,000 athletes for our 6 to near on 60 years old. Our main target market is obviously the 11 to 18 secondary school, high school, whatever you want to say, age group. Obviously, the main reason for that is those that are too young. So in that primary school bracket, they've got so much growth left that they might be good then, but they've got so much time to mature and either lose their skills or gain more skills and things like that, or the person you've not spotted at the time. Whereas in that 11 to 18 bracket, you've got the ability to delve into height predictions, maturity status. Repeated visits are starting to come in now, so schools are coming back to us, and you can look at the pre-post testing and see. We've had one kid since last May, we tested last week, he's gained 9 kilos and he's gone up in height by an absolute mile. His strength's gone up and his speed's gone up, but his body fat's come down. So then you can start seeing those natural changes in someone, and go, okay, well, he's onto something. And it's obviously, it's never going to be a snapshot. We're not going to ring someone up after one testing day and be like, you're the next best thing, I'm going to give the EIS a ring right now. Like, that's not how we're going to work. But there's a mix of tests to do with speed, agility, fitness, strength, jump, to give a good rounded look in at someone. It's obviously a little bit more team sport focused. It's done in a sports hall, so we're limited by space and limited by space in the van to be able to carry around some VO2 max testing equipment. But obviously that's not going to fit with the volume that we're at. So we're doing sort of whole classes at a time, and they're going around the room and completing all the tests and stuff. So we're taking that information, we're looking and helping the PE teachers, either GCSE kids, they're getting the whole coursework side of things, like the pre-post testing, and with their own program, they're getting to see how that's actually changed with really valid gold standard equipment. And other teachers are getting an insight into sort of where the group averages are. So we'll provide a school with, oh, you're really fast, but no one's really got that much stamina and fitness, like off the yo-yo test. So maybe you should look into doing a little bit more fitness, or if that's not their goal, then they can take that with a pinch of salt. But other places you might say, okay, well, everyone can go really well in a straight line, but your agility scores are miles down. So some of that's clearly technique based, and that's obviously off a visual interpretation from us on the day. Some of it might be strength based, if you can compare their relative strength score with their straight line speed, and then they can't use the strength to absorb and reapply that force to become agile. There's loads of different reasons why, obviously, but we're giving that the staff an insight into where they might be able to adapt their PE lessons and provide a bit more focus to make people a bit more of a rounded athlete as well. It's not all about elite or nothing. It's making everyone a little bit physically better and helping make the country a little bit healthier, because obviously we're up to 6,000 athletes now with plenty more to come. Day to day, we're looking at doing, as you said, what does my week look like? We're between 3 schools a week at the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously mainly London-based, but yeah, get a really, really good picture. And obviously, at some point, we're looking to publish this information, and it'll be probably one of the first studies out there that's got 10,000 athletes, and we can go and piece together the average in the UK for an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old. Then any coach can go, okay, well, compared to this entire cohort around the country, this kid's in the top 2%, or he's 2 standard deviations ahead, or whatever. Like, and you can just pull upon this data and make your own decisions based off the legwork that MVP have done.
I mean, it sounds like there's almost certainly a PhD in that for sure for somebody.
Yeah, definitely. If you're keen on numbers and you're good with data analysis and coding and all that sort of stuff, then get in touch.
Jump right in. A couple of things you said there that I really liked. The first one is one of my pet hates, is the misconception either from parents or technical coaches or whoever that S&C is for the elite. And the second one you said, which I'm going to ask you to expand upon, is a potential misconception from parents, in the sense that, for example, you'll test the kid and then immediately the test scores come in and you're ringing up these Olympic organizations. So apart from that, or maybe if you want to delve into that a little bit more, what do you think the biggest misconception is, either whether it's parents, technical coaches, PE teachers, whatever demographic you want to use? What do you think is the biggest misconception when it comes to either talent ID or long-term athletic development?
The biggest misconception is definitely getting a 14-year-old who gets their results back and top 3%, 2%, top 10% on the various scores. And that kid rightly thinks he's going to make it. And then the other kid who gets bottom half goes, well, there's no point in trying that. I'm not going to get there. And it's that, as you've literally just said, like, they're receiving their first time snapshot. It's basically the first time we visit a school, it's clearly baseline testing. We're telling you where you're at now and giving you an opportunity to see where you're good and where you excel, and then where your areas of improvement are. And that's what we always describe them as, is areas of improvement. Not here's your strengths and weaknesses. It's here's your strengths and areas of improvement to become a more rounded athlete. And it's, yeah, I think the biggest thing is from coaches historically, they look at a 12-year-old tennis player and they're already 5'9", and they go, oh, we'll have him. And then come 14, the 5'3" kid's now 5'10". He's developed late, but hasn't got a shot, because they go, oh, he's not proved himself at an under 12 and under 13 age group. Why would I choose him over the kid who's been here 2 years? And then suddenly he starts beating him in friendlies, and the next minute you've chosen the wrong guy because you looked, and you've stuck with that decision. I think there's got to be an element of being fickle and being like, okay, let's clean slate every time and see how you get on. There's got to be obviously a point of choice, but if you go and listen to one of Ross Tucker's podcasts on this, they chat about a lot of Olympians. There's something like the medalists are late, typically haven't found their sport until 17 to 19 years old, whereas a lot of the other finalists have been doing it since 14, 15. So you can see that a late arrival in the sport is allowing them to peak at the point that matters at the Olympic Games. But so then the medalists are coming in and they're adding the variety, playing football, playing tennis, this and that, whatever, then moving into the sport because they've found it late or enjoyed it, or something else has happened to them. And I played hockey because I broke my leg and didn't want to play football and get kicked in the leg that hurt anymore. And that was a forced change, whereas I could have obviously chosen anything. the hockey's then given me the hand-eye coordination to get to a standard in tennis to play against you at the school and enjoy ourselves and things like that. And just being able to take those opportunities and try different things rather than just feel like you're set in stone for life. Like, I was never athletic at school, so I'm never going to go to the gym for the rest of my life. Like, that's how a lot of people think and speak, and you meet a lot of people who are down that route. They go, well, there are some that aren't. Like, I was never sporty at school, but once the pressure of PE was gone away, I started to find something that I liked. And there's a few people either side of that, but I think we need to encourage everyone to pursue something. And once again, going back to why I do what I do, find something they enjoy.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things that have emerged from that I want to ask you about. The first one is, you mentioned, for example, you might have an athlete who finishes in the bottom half of the testing or whatever, and just thinks, oh, well, what's the point then? And this athlete may previously have had, may have had no inclination as to where they were, and they might have loved sport. So my first question is, in an ideal world, if the tests were valid, reliable, accurate, what psychosocial metrics would you love to include in your assessment battery, assuming that they were somehow valid and reliable?
It'd definitely be, what do you play at the moment? What would you like to play? And just get an understanding of, I play football for the school because the school, quote unquote, make me, or I feel like I should, or my friends play football, so I play football, or I don't play any sport because I'm not in the friendship group of the people who do play football, as a lot of the cases may be. So whether it's you haven't sat down at home and gone, oh, well, I'm quite good at that, why don't I just go and try running, and then just go out and start running and see track and field or whatever, is something that you like, or you go try swimming. And I think having something just to ask them, what have you thought about, what haven't you thought about, and then provide them with that whole BBC Inspired, it might be, where you can just click on and be like, find out near you where there's a boxing club, or find out near you there's a kayaking club. And obviously that's a great place to start. I think what motivates you would be another one, and then sort of a personality one. So are you extrovert, introvert? Because I think you're obviously going to get both in all sports, but typically the team sport people are more extroverted, and sometimes often more than not than there's other sports like running, where you do a lot of training on your own potentially, if you're especially a distance runner. So the introverted side of things might be more suited to you, whereas maybe you've got to be an extrovert to be a boxer because that eccentricity sells tickets, and then you need that to become a bit like for the business side of it. So I think you could find sports based off personality, and that might help them find what their body's suited to. And if they're not going to go pro, then it's not like you must play tennis because your arm length and your shin length is suited to tennis. Like, go and let them find out, and just swing a bat or hit a table tennis racket. Like, unless you're obviously going down the pro route, then you might look at Phelps's biomechanics and be like, okay, well, he's got short legs and ridiculously long arms. He's got size 13 feet. Like, he's built for the sport that he's found. And I think without going down this horrendous rabbit hole of like Caster Semenya, my sort of take on that is that she's lucked out and found the sport that she's physiologically perfect for, and then she's being punished for it. So she has a lot of muscle, she can train really hard, she can recover quite well, and she's found the sport that she's designed for. And that's the same with Usain Bolt. He's twitchy, he's tall, he's got a ridiculous long stride length, but he's got the cadence to match everyone else. So he became heralded as the all-time great because he's found the sport that he's perfect for. Like, he might have gone and, as he always dreamed of, played football but never made it. And Caster Semenya might have gone and been a South African, I don't know, cricketer, women's cricket, and then never succeeded because that's not the sport that she's designed for. But there's always those people who are the greatest of all time because they've lucked out on the sport that their bodies physiologically suit really well.
Yeah, and as you said, it is a massive rabbit hole, and obviously one we've spoken a lot about off air. Without meaning to sort of steer the conversation back to something you previously said, You gave the example of people who, for example, will get to the gym or won't get to the gym because they're like, oh, well, I was always rubbish at PE. I'm not very athletic. What do you think would need to change in terms of how physical education is delivered currently in order to try and minimize that happening? Like you mentioned, for example, that you broke your leg, but obviously you were still physically literate enough to pick up another sport and do it to a recreational standard. So what do you think needs to change about the PE curriculum in order to make it so that kids leave their school being physically literate and being able to pick up a sport of their choosing to a reasonable standard?
Yeah, it certainly comes into improving basic physical literacy, which was a massive goal of ours, teaching and letting the kids understand how to move. And as you might have seen online, like teaching people how to fall is really important, because that's obviously going to save an injury and save that time out of a sport. But yeah, teaching people how to move, and then once you can move well, as you know, you can adapt yourself to other sports. But I think the key point has got to be, or A, make that fun, B, evidence the end goal. The kids aren't going to understand why they're walking down the line on their tiptoes in first lesson, but they're soon going to be doing plyometrics in 4 weeks' time, and like the introduction to jumping and landing. And that's cool. We're doing rabbit hops over a bench that then becomes a box jump, which becomes a whatever else, drop jump into a slap your hand on the wall and get us out. Like, everything has to be like shown towards like, this works for this reason in sport. And the people who might not be sporty then almost become sporty because they've learned how to move well, or when they get a little bit older. So say that happened from age 11 through 13, so year 7 and 8. They hit year 9 where there's a little bit more sport going on, and then they actually enjoy it more because they're not quote unquote bottom of the class, or they're not playing in the F team or something like that. Like, people are more likely to enjoy the sport that's on offer, because I can see both sides. Like, from us teaching, you can't go out and teach 30 sports a week, or else no one's going to get better, because they're not going to then see that first sport until the second year that they're at school. Well, if you go around in 2 30-week cycles or whatever, like, you can't go and teach every sport under the sun, but you've got to be able to teach someone to adapt to the sport. And as soon as trampoline club becomes available, they can go and bounce around and learn how to flip on a trampoline. And then as soon as the summer comes and they can go and join the cricket club, like, they don't want to do that because they've built the hand-eye coordination through throwing and catching the ball in the winter in the sports hall. So it's certainly building those basic skills that can be introduced, because the teacher certainly can't learn how to teach every sport under the sun, or else the quality of the teaching is going to go down, and the student isn't going to get better by doing a sport once, to give them an exposure to every sport, to find that one kid amongst 30 is like that sport and 29 have hated it, and then the next day a different one child has liked one sport and 29 have hated it, or else the percentage return on that is pretty low, whereas the percentage return on making everyone move well is going to be a lot higher.
Yeah, and equally something that we both appreciate as sort of S&C coaches working within a school, is that you need to obviously disguise that movement, as you said, whether it's bunny hops or, you know, whatever. And you can't just have, for example, a double lesson of, right, now we're going to learn to squat. So my next question is, obviously hopefully we helped the PE teachers at the school we were based at learn a lot. What are the biggest things that you think S&C coaches can learn from PE teachers?
It almost comes back to the same thing I've learned from the business people, which is the whole managing human beings. Come into an S&C, if you've only done an internship like we have, you've gone university to a professional internship where they turn up on time, they turn up in the right kit, they turn up knowing what they're about to do, versus 30 11-year-olds who are asking you the most ridiculous questions you've never thought you'd be asked in your life, and just learning how to manage groups and sort of become that bossy person and order people and create efficiency within the lesson. And that efficiency with a PE lesson where you have a curriculum to follow, you have set targets to hit, follow over into the S&C gym where you go, okay, well, how can I minimize time wastage on this? Like, okay, we'll make sure they all turn up and they've got X, Y, and Z lined up, ready to go, and the gym's set up, ready to go, and they understand that this person's been in there and you've pre-grouped it all, and like doing all the legwork beforehand, and then understanding the level to reprimand as well. It's obviously for S&C at a youth level we're discussing here, but I still feel like, especially at Broncos, where I'm now working with the 14 and 15-year-olds, there's has to be an element of reprimand for various things, so like nips it in the bud early. But I've learned through practice at 2 years at the school in terms of how to deliver that. And you can certainly see parents out in the park that go from, no, don't run over there, no, come back, and then like the kids just unbelievably confused on what they're trying to do because the parents trying to do a different order every 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Whereas like the whole, just give them an instruction and be like, okay. And if they make a different mistake, then that's fine. They haven't done the one that you've told them not to do.
Yeah, very true, very true. One thing we're big on is that S&C obviously doesn't just improve the physical qualities of an athlete or a person. Whether it's stuff you do at Broncos with your own coaching, how do you look to improve the sort of human aspect of the people that you're coaching?
This comes down to independent learn to rather than ask a question. Because asking a question takes up your time and their time to wait to get the answer. Whereas encouraging trial and error, and then being like, okay, I tried this, why didn't this work? And then you might give them the answer by rewarding them at the fact that they've even tried. And I've got a great example over Christmas coaching a few youth athletes, and one guy replied, didn't do it, didn't have a dumbbell, and another guy replied, didn't have a dumbbell, used a plate instead. Like, it's the same exercise, the same day, and two people have come back with two completely different opportunities to, but one succeeded. He's used the plate and gone, well, that weighs 2 kilos, that weighs 2 kilos, I'll just use that one if that's not there. The other kid's gone, whoa, can't do that, I'm not gonna, it's not right. And then was he coming back and going, okay, well, have you thought about this? And suddenly they're just like, their eyes light up because they've never thought about it before. But then next time they go, oh, okay, well, I haven't got my studs, I'll just use my trainers. Not, I haven't got my studs, I can't do it. And it's the whole encouraging people to come up to you, especially at a school and rugby club, and removing the, I can't do that. It's, this is what's wrong, what can I do instead? And it's always that independent thought of me, and then you can throw it back on them and go, okay, well, what have you done before that might be similar to this? And then they can answer their own question. I think the PGC term is guided discovery, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the, I mean, that could be a whole podcast in itself. But as you said, developing these young humans to think for themselves when potentially, especially in, as you said, the environments that we've been in, there's a lot of times where the help is deliberately put in front of them and quite literally forced in front of their face. And as you said, it can sometimes work against you in the sense of that, obviously, as you said, that lad who was like, didn't have the weight, so didn't know what to do, so didn't do it. In terms of, so as you said, obviously you've been at Broncos, we've learned what we've learned on the Masters, and obviously we're both trying to continue developing with the coaches that we work with. Now, if you could spend a period of time with one coach and their athlete or their athletes, who would you want to spend time with and why?
I'm going to throw out a somewhat niche reference, but it's based off another documentary I've seen. It's a guy called Buddy Morris, and he was the Arizona Cardinals S&C coach, and he's renowned over in America for everything he's done there. And there's a key point in that documentary where he goes to the coach, I think we need to back off here, the loads are getting a little high, boys are getting tired. Head coach goes, I ain't fucking happening, we need to win. And then obviously he's taken everything that he knows in S&C, that what the coach has said, and the coach is in the wrong, and he just goes, okay, sir, and takes a step back. And he clearly has a great knowledge of managing managing coaches' expectations while managing the players. So I'm sure he would have then tailored his gym session to fit the fact that those boys have gone too hard out on the field, and he's adjusted that himself because the coach is learning off him and learning that whole coach relationship, athlete technical coach relationship was almost glorious to watch, and to look at his hatred for what he was being told, but his acceptance that was what was going to happen. Plus the whole environment of American football, it's a sport that I follow, it's a sport that I'm a fan of. I think it'd just be fantastic to see how it all comes together, because for those that don't know, in the off season, they have no contact with the club. So then the players have to go out and train themselves in the off season, and obviously some might let themselves go, some might get into unbelievable shape come pre-season, but it's not up to the club to do any of that. And then their season finishes in February, the Super Bowl, in 2 weeks' time, I think it is, and they don't come back until pre-season until July. So that's not like a football where you go, have a holiday, we'll be straight back in again. You've got to be teaching the players so much education so they can go and either do it themselves, or that's where companies like Exos exist to coach those players as well. But to have that, to instill so much knowledge that the players can take that for almost a third of the year, and then come back and you see them and you've been rewarded with the fact that they've come back in good shape, because you're not allowed to contact with those players. I think it would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, and as we said, touching on the social media side of things, no doubt there is several people who would love to be associated with that player and will obviously do whatever they can to be either paid by or associated with that player. You've almost, as you said, you've got to educate them to the nth degree, build those relationships, and do everything you can to make sure that when they come back, they're not effectively going to lose you your job. And in just wrapping up, if in terms of recommended resources, whether it's books, podcasts, anything that you like, what would be your list of most recommended resources?
Number one, I think, would be the Science of Sport podcast from Ross Tucker. And this is less S&C related, more just discussing the world of sport. For you, if you enjoy sport and you enjoy hearing about great analogies and really getting a good understanding about things. So the podcast recently is like, what rugby can teach the world about coaching and concussion, and then what's the deal with this new Nike shoe? Obviously they've done one on Caster Semenya, they've done one on, there's a new one out recently on well, it used to be called the female athlete triad, now it's been changed to Red S, but it's basically about overtraining, under nutrition, what the causes of that are, eating disorders, and the whole Alberto Salazar thing with how he's psychologically affected people that have worked for him underneath with all the fat shaming and stuff. So you've got a huge variety to go off on that. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and each one of them's neatly wrapped up in about an hour. Good easy listening for those that are in London with us on the tube.
And finally, if people want to reach out to you and either find out more about the work you do with MVP or just have any questions for you, how can they get in touch with you?
So through the MVP social media, so that's project_MVP, and MVP projectmvp.co.uk is our website where you can have a look at more about what we do for that. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all on there.
Excellent. I'll get those all in the show notes. Thank you very much for your time, mate. And 29 minutes past 6. How's that for 6:30 timing?
Perfect. Thank you very much, mate.
Right. All the best, mate. And I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.